So does Immortality have a weakness, beautiful people? Yes, indeed, it has one, especially if we are referring to Cyrus Immortality, because this is this beautiful episode everybody was expecting, and it's honestly your fault if you won't watch this episode till the end, because if you saw the preview of this episode, not just only his weakness will be part of this episode. I want to show you how I have built my Cyrus setup to do exactly what I wanted to do. Also, I want to show you exactly why Cyrus performs the way he performs in a rally. And of course, the third part is the one in which I'm going to explain you where is his big weakness. And not just only that, what matches would be better to attack him, how to attack him. And that may probably also shock you, because in these tactics, free-to-play are included. Yes. But honestly, beautiful people, there's another thing which is super shocking, because specifically those information, you already find it in this episode, somewhere around in here, which I published 2 weeks ago. Because you really have to be aware, if you are watching my episodes from the beginning till the end, there is a high risk that you're gonna learn a lot of tricks and tips. So yeah, be careful about that. So let's start first with the setup, and I'm gonna take one random battle report, and we're gonna go right away to the comparison. What you see here is exactly what I want my match to do, and it does it. Or in other words, I want Buddika and Mansa Musa total damage to come as close as possible to the damage coming from Cyrus, which is absolutely crazy. But I'm gonna need a certain build in order for this here to be very effective. And if I take another battle report, a slightly longer one, in this case 38 seconds, you don't have to worry that much about Mansa Musa's healing, as in 38 seconds 24,000 points of healing is very solid. So good, let's jump directly into the lineup. So this is the setup, beautiful people, and you know what? I'm gonna start for a certain reason actually with Mansa Musa. And of course the skills, from my perspective, there is no better setup than Golden Odyssey and Fearless Retribution. No, I don't wanna use Meta. Good. Now let's jump to the horse, which, yeah, it's basically a work in progress, kind of. This is the most important part of this horse, the trait. The lifesaver, it could be better, but this is a topic for a different episode, because yeah, in that episode we can talk about 3 traits, yeah? And when it comes down to his adornment, well, this is the one which I worked a little bit more on, because from my perspective, I'm expecting this match to need 2 defense adornments, and for Cyrus, it's going to be an offense one with a certain trait. So here you also see I have worked on his attribute, which is the resistance, by the way. And I can show you basically in here, when it comes down to the intensification, it really goes up. And you're going to need 50 of those silver bars in order to unlock actually the damage reduction. And also, this last tier goes from level 40 to level 60. But you already see 2 levels after I have unlocked this, and I already need 440 of this raw iron. Good. Let's have a look at the ring. Super important, that's the Tranquil Water. More to this a little bit later. And what's important now, obviously the gear. But not just only the gems, I really have to show you also the gear stars level, because I already get here a 1.2% damage reduction. More to this in just a second, because there are a few types of damage reduction, this being the general one. The gloves actually has 2.5% skill damage, which means he alone will gonna do more might damage. The chest has a 1.2% damage reduction, and of course the boots has a 1.5% extra skill damage only for him alone. Now let's talk about the gems. And I actually have to show you this, because I won't explain again why am I using health, why am I using match capacity, because you have this beautiful video. Go watch it, in which you're going to see a formula. Yes, indeed, it's going to take you a while to set your match perfectly, but trust me when I tell you, it's going to be absolutely worth it. So let's address the other gems except the health and the match size. So yeah, you see me here using all attributes but also might. I'm gonna address this exactly when I'm reaching Cyrus, because if you remember correctly, what I want from this march is all 3 heroes to do damage. Or a quick spoiler, yes, I am in a process of replacing all the gems into might, because I won't need all hero attributes for this specific setup. But we're gonna go more into detail in just a moment. When it comes down basically to the chest, yes, I have 3 times hero passive skill damage, definitely super worth it. And when it comes down to the boots, I have 1 healing gem on him simply because I don't have an extra passive damage gem right now. And you see I'm using a might also. Good. So that's all about Mansa Musa. Let's have a look at Buddika. These are the best skills from my perspective when it comes down to this setup, doing exactly what I wanted to do. Is the King's Blade and Forceful Retaliation. Let's have a look at the horse, which again, it's a yellow horse, but this is a very important trait, which is extra passive might damage 8.4%. Of course, I was a little bit lucky that the horse is a legendary horse and also gives me might. I don't care about the siege. And of course, let's have a look at the Adornment also. I have this attribute, again, resistance, but that is not further developed. But of course, here you also can see the intensification. I indeed have worked a little bit, so 9 level missing in order for me to unlock tier number 3, which is the damage reduction. And a hint right here, this build heavily relies on this, the damage reduction. Now let's have a look at the gear. And again, we are not talking about health or match capacity. I already have explained that. But you already see I am switching everything to might. More in just a second. When it comes down to the chest, obviously, 3 passive skill damage on her. And when it comes down to the boost, yeah, a hero might, a hero passive skill damage, and of course in this case I have a health in there. Good, now let's jump to Mr. Cyrus. Of course, first we start with the skills, and from my perspective there is no better setup right now than Forceful Retaliation together with Child of Prophecy. And let's have a look at the horse, and yes indeed I have been lucky, but then again, wherever I had the chance to buy these whistles, I bought them all. So that's a lot. Here I have 2 traits which are indeed crazy. I won't touch this horse anytime soon. Trait number 1 is Overpower, a 10% huge. Good, when it comes down to the second trait, this is not that bad at all, because it's a passive skill damage reduction, generally speaking. So it is for might, but it's also for strategy, because yeah, we have new heroes coming. Now let's have a look also at this Adornment, which I will definitely going to replace. Sadly, I'm waiting now for the developers to introduce these attributes in the battle reports in order for me to see even better how much damage am I getting out of this. So there's no hurry when it comes down to that. If we go to intensification, you see I have 2 tiers unlocked, so the defense and the health, and I am right now at level 31 from 40. So 9 level missing in order to unlock the damage reduction. But this one I will gonna change. Now let's talk about the most important part right here. And let me again remind you what I want my march to do. Buddika's damage plus Mansa Musa's damage must come as close as possible to Cyrus. And that's why you have to aim for the might gems. But not just only on Cyrus, on all 3 heroes. Now of course I'm not saying that the all attributes gems are useless, but for this build alone, might is 100% better for all 3 heroes. But let me explain you this in another interesting way. And I specifically took 3 screenshots when I was changing from all attributes, which is this build over here, to more and more might gems. And here are the numbers which are super important. So when you have a look to, for example, on my Cyrus, it had 808 might, but here he goes up to 829 might. Sure, you can also see how the armor goes down, how the strategy goes down. And then from here, I was switching the all attributes gems of Buddika into might. And again, the same thing. The might goes up, while the other 2 stats, the armor and the strategy, we don't want to talk about the siege, they are going down. And I'm not ready with this transition yet. You can already see what exactly am I losing because I no longer use all attributes. Because again, all three heroes, priority is to do damage. So we come from 617.6% might defense down to 614.2% might defense. Well, beautiful people, that's just 3% might defense. And here I must mention something super important, because this 3% difference in might defense, for me, when my stats are that high, it's barely noticeable, but indeed 3% we're gonna have double the value which they give me if your might defense is just 300%. An important fact. But here comes an even more important fact. And this is exactly the point in which the developers really have to be super careful when it comes down to this stat. Because sure, indeed, King Arthur has the highest benefit because he can bypass 50% of the troop defense, that base value, plus might and strategy defense. And sure, we're gonna need another episode in which I'm gonna rank you the stats based on their value, because not just only King Arthur, even Cyrus is able to bypass the defense. Yeah, 64% chance to ignore 20% of enemies' defense. And now let's go back for a second on the buffs, a super important tab, which, by the way, again, dear developers, we desperately need an update here, because what I don't see in here are very, very important stats like the damage increase, damage decrease, skill damage increase, skill damage decrease, and so on. Because it doesn't matter if you are a free-to-play player or a super high spender, we need this transparency in order for us to be far easier to slowly see our progress when we are building certain setups. Because yeah, beautiful people, in this case, this setup is indeed crazy, but it heavily relies on the damage reduction. And since we cannot see this in the stats, but definitely the developers will gonna add this later, I have to show you this manually. So first of all, we're gonna go into the research. And in the old tree, which is this one over here, you won't find any damage increase or damage decrease of any type. But in the new research, yes indeed, there is a section which gives you a might damage reduction right here and a strategy damage reduction. Therefore, I can say that I get a 10% damage reduction in total for both might and also strategy. So 10% coming from here. Now, of course, we're gonna have to have a look at the gear, but we have to be also careful, because the last stat does indeed give me the damage reduction, and I have a 2.4% here on Cyrus helm, and you also get damage reduction, but only for the units which counters me. It's a damage reduction, but it's specifically in this case only against the swordsman. 2.4% damage reduction overall I'm getting from the helm, because I have it at 5 stars, and also from the chest I get another 2.4% damage reduction. Well, of course, there is also this specific damage reduction, but exclusively versus swordsmen. Of course, the same goes for Buddika's gear, and on the helm I have another 2.4% damage reduction. On the chest I have just a 1.6% damage reduction, and when we have a look at Mansa Musa, on the helm I have just a 1.2% overall damage reduction, and on the chest I have another 1.2% damage reduction. So from this perspective of only the overall damage reduction, the gear gives me another roughly 10.1% damage reduction overall. Plus the 10% from that new research, that's a 20%. So where else am I getting pure damage reduction overall? Of course, if we have a look at the mercenaries, you can click directly here on the attributes, and what you're gonna see that indeed you're gonna get a damage increase overall versus basically all unit type. But what you won't find in here is a pure damage reduction. Sure, yes, pikeman will take lesser damage, but exclusively only from the swordsman. So we are still right now at roughly 20% damage reduction. So where else am I getting the damage reduction? Well, good, let's slowly move to the mounts. Or to be more precisely, actually to the adornments. And if I click here on the items, we click on Mansa Musa, and here you see that the resistance actually gives me a damage reduction of 10.13%, a value which will count at one point in this video, and of course the overall damage reduction of 3.35%. But this right here is limited just for the first 18 seconds. When we have a look at Buddika, it's the same attribute, the resistance, though is not higher upgrade. So therefore, just the first 18 seconds, 6.25% damage reduction, and an overall 2.7%. So on Cyrus, I will specifically go for an adornment with attack, which basically won't give me that damage reduction. And of course, I also have to add the passive attributes from Mansa Musa right now, coming from the base attributes, which is tier 3. It's roughly around, let's say, 3% damage reduction. Follow me for a second. We said we had 20% damage reduction. Sadly, I cannot count this one because, yeah, it's just for 18 seconds. And I only can count this one. So it's 3.35 plus another 2.7. So let's say a roughly, I don't know, 6%. So as of right now, I have 26% raw damage reduction, which is permanent and not depending on a certain timer. So where else am I getting this pure damage reduction? Obviously, we have to look at the animal research, and basically you see my tree. And here we're only going to find a damage increase. When it comes down to the damage decrease, well, that's specifically versus cavalry. Meaning, in other words, versus just one single troop, which Cyrus either way doesn't have a problem with. So I won't count it as overall damage reduction. And probably you know exactly where I'm going with this, because now we have to have a look at the rings, which sure are absolutely super awesome. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, these two rings, the Lofty Mountain and also the Tranquil Water, these are to be considered universal rings. And from my perspective, these two rings are really the best rings right now in game. Now let's look in here for the damage reduction. This is indeed a damage reduction, so applying only for the skills. But where else we see a huge chunk of damage reduction? Well, we see it here, 40% damage reduction, but again, just for the 18 seconds. And you're going to see something similar on the Lofty Mountain, but again, hooked to a timer, because just the first 18 seconds, there's another 11.36% damage reduction, which adds up to roughly 50% of damage reduction, but just for the first 18 seconds. And this number will gonna play a role. So this is my build. Now let me explain you properly why Cyrus performs the way he performs in a rally. Now when you are in a rally, you have a button right here, which is the battle details. And let's play this video with my video editor, because you are getting this panel. So where do you have to pay attention? Obviously here I have Lubu, but let's imagine for a second in here it's actually Cyrus. So you see right from the beginning that my cavalry is searching and fighting archers. So what's gonna happen when there is no more archers in here? And let's go a bit more further, and there you go. At this point right now, there are no archers anymore for my cavalry. Therefore, the system now tries to hook me up with either swordsmen or cavalry. And let's carry on to see what happens now. In this case, I'm paired with swordsmen as cavalry because there are no archers. And this goes on, and you can have a look what happens here. This is, for example, a pikeman setup. Searching and fighting cavalry. And the short version is, when you put Cyrus in a rally, what basically happens is always a 1 versus 1. And Cyrus is simply not built for that. But you do indeed have a huge advantage when you should use indeed Cyrus in your rally, especially when the rally becomes smaller and smaller and people are losing. Your Cyrus will gonna keep the rally longer alive and give your allies the time to actually join that rally so it doesn't get disbanded. And that's why Cyrus' performance is not that well in rally. But I can explain it in a different way. Imagine for a second Cyrus is a sports car, a hypercar. Can you drive with this car off-road, in the woods? Technically speaking, yes. Will you come far? Probably not. The car is great, but it's not made for this. And even if you try to adjust this hypercar, in this case Cyrus, to lift it up a little bit so you are able to drive a bit more deeper into the woods, the car is not made for this. And it's absolutely fine. Cyrus is made to be attacked by a lot of opponents, or basically attacking rallies. Which brings us now to this third part of this episode, the important one: how can you counter such a march? And do you remember how much damage reduction overall I have permanently? Was around 20%, right? But indeed, I have more coming from the Adornment. Yes, indeed, I have more coming from the rings, but this is exactly where the weakness lies. Because if we go to the Adornments and look at these two defensive Adornments which I have on the pikemans, and we look at the special effect, after 18 seconds, I no longer have this 10%, nor this 6.8%. All it remains is just a permanent 3.35%. So it's already a 16% loss. If we look at the Adornment on Buddika, it's the same thing. After 18 seconds, I'm losing another 10% damage reduction and get to keep permanently only at 2.7. And it's the same basically for the rings, though the difference, it's enormous. Because when we look at the lofty mountain, after 18 seconds, I'm losing another 11% of damage reduction. I'm not getting this back because I am in combat. And it's even crazier when we look at the tranquil water. This is a very powerful effect. That's a 40% damage decrease. I'm losing this after 18 seconds. So round about 60% damage reduction, I'm actually losing after 18 seconds. And this is another trick which probably a couple of you guys probably notice. I have a lot of skins, March skin I mean, but I will never gonna use them in the battle for a simple reason. I want my March to look as normal as possible because I wanna reach my target at full strength, and that's always gonna be a rally. And your job is basically when you see a player with Cyrus on the map and you know you have a rally, your goal is literally to get him in combat minimum 18 seconds before he reaches the rally. It makes indeed a huge impact. But I have far more to tell you about. But let's actually discuss this topic, because this means, in other words, that you should attack Cyrus. Of course, I'm going to explain you which unit type is actually better, but right off the bat, the free-to-play players were going to have a situation like this, in which they were going to say, you know what, Timmy right now with his Cyrus setup is roaming around in our hive and killing tiles. I am online, I'm willing to help, but attacking him would be literally suicide and help him more than it helps me. So therefore I cannot help as a free-to-play player or as a low spender. So are these people correct when they assume that? Well, here comes the shock. No, you are wrong, by the way. Because even as free-to-play player, a low-budget player, all you have to do is set all your 5 marches with literally just one unit. No more than that. And you're gonna spam and attack me with that. Now what's gonna happen, because this is a battle report from my farm, but it's gonna look the same. You're gonna have 1 light wounded troop per march, and I'm gonna get a light wounded troop. For you, this light wounded troop equals 0 losses. For me, it also represents 0 losses, but the fact that I'm so far away from my citadel in events like the Golden Expedition or in KVK, I'm somewhere in your hive, plus the fact that I am attacking tiles, what you are doing with this tactic, you are actively reducing my march size. So if a lot of players send 5 marches with just one troop, you are slowly reducing my march size over time till one of your friends, which is much stronger than you, can come and together to kill my Cyrus. And please don't laugh about this tactic, because this is not something which I am applying obviously in game. No, beautiful people, sadly I'm speaking from the receiving point of this tactic, which is so brutal that as soon as I see that my opponent is applying this on me, I will try to avoid as much as possible to be attacked by those marches. Not just only I'm reducing my march size, I'm also marching far more slower because I'm constantly in combat. Not to mention again the 60% damage reduction which I'm losing after 18 seconds. But if you truly want to hit a march like this in general, which is by the way super worth it to invest your resource in it, even if you cannot get it as strong as my setup is, what would be other setups which you can attack this march with the goal to take as much units down as possible? Because when you thought only the cavalry has an issue with Cyrus, they technically actually have an advantage. So let's actually start with the archers. And I have a very powerful setup for my archers. But if we want to see this from the efficient perspective, I really don't want to hit Cyrus with my archers. And if you are a weaker player and I want to play very efficient with my troops, we both share the only option, which is run. As it won't matter if it's a 1 versus 1. It won't matter if more players are with you to help taking down Cyrus. You will gonna experience severe losses, me included. Now I said that cavalry actually has an advantage in this case. Yeah, your cavalry march can run faster. Cause yeah, beautiful people, I have a very powerful cavalry setup, and every time I attack a Cyrus setup, a medium build Cyrus setup, I always look at the battery zone and say, okay, who exactly thought it's a good idea to implement Cyrus in game? That's the reality. So the only option left are obviously the swordsmen, but also the pikemans. Obviously the tactician pikemans are super strong versus Cyrus, because like I said, Cyrus is not built for a 1 versus 1. And you're definitely gonna get a super strong performance versus Cyrus. Of course, obviously with the swordsman too. But especially when it comes down to slowing me down, keeping me in combat. Or in other words, those 18 seconds before I reach your rally, which is my target, you can use a Cyrus setup. Because they don't have that many hits. This is a counter-attack march. It has to be hit in order to hit back. So you're definitely gonna delay my march in a very efficient way. And when I reach your rally, well, I'm kind of missing those 60% damage reduction, beautiful people. And yes, indeed, this strategy of attacking, no matter what well set up, with one troop to actively take down his march capacity, to slow him down, will be part of that episode in which I promised you guys to show you what makes this game so fantastic, even for free-to-play players, because I have not reported this tactic and I won't consider to be a bug. A 1 unit march to have the same losses, aka 1 light unit, because I see it as a tool for free-to-play players and for low budget all the way up to medium budget player. I consider this to be a tool and I'm absolutely fine with that. But apropos damage reduction, let me show you something extremely important. And apropos damage reduction, beautiful people, let's talk actually about the damage increase for the following reason. As everybody says, the damage increase is more valuable than the attack, okay? We know that. But I want to give you a number, as that will gonna help you to understand what exactly people mean by better. So I'm gonna put 2 columns here on the screen. Please pay attention that both stats work parallel to each other and both stats actually apply on the attack. Right here on this 170 points value. But if we were to find a connection between damage increase and attack, well, beautiful people, the developers of Age of Empires Mobile have not reinvented the wheel with this game. I have been playing this type of games for more than 15 years now. And in those games, the stats tab was far more detailed, and we were able to do far more tests. And what we've seen in there, that 1% damage increase is kind of equivalent to 6 or 7% attack. But again, keep in mind that both stats work parallel to each other. And this value which you see on the screen, it's only for you to understand approximately by how much. And of course I have to mention, this is how I expect this value to be. And we also have, of course, damage increase of the skills of the hero, which I'm expected to be slightly higher, but not more than that. So yeah, beautiful people, this was the video on Cyrus. And if the developers would have asked me before what you think about us implementing Cyrus, I would have said, please don't do that. It doesn't belong in this game, even though the counterattack pikemen were really in a very poor position. Because even if the developer's plan is basically introducing now Cyrus, but then later on to introduce a hero which has to have the same level of craziness to counter properly Cyrus, well, again, we're gonna have the same issue like you just seen in this episode. Archers should not have this issue directly with Cyrus. And of course, I'm actually super curious to hear your thoughts in a comment. Let's start a debate on this topic. And maybe you guys have some other ideas we can discuss. And I want to be super clear about this video. Its goal is not to show you what happens when you pair knowledge with money. Nor I intend for this video to actually be a joke. And I also didn't honestly expect it there would be that many players which are expecting from this episode to show you how to kill such a setup like this, as it honestly cost me more than King Arthur, but it was worth it, and regardless of your item's income, or in other words free to play all the way up to high spenders, Cyrus setup, it's a very powerful setup and it's absolutely super worth it. And of course, what's left to say is there is one true currency very valuable for us content creators, and that happens to be actually free, as all you have to do to repay me for this work, motivate me to carry on, is just to subscribe to this channel. Obviously, watch my videos till the end, share this channel with your friends. Thank you very much for watching, beautiful people. I'm gonna catch you in the next one. Ciao, ciao, ciao.